Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Anna Hearn. I do represent Pyramid Art Books and Custom Framing, your partner here today with New Millennium Church. We are excited to welcome three very talented minds in theology and religious studies. Today, we are featuring Dr. Obery Hendricks, author of Christians Against Christianity. Right-wing evangelicals are destroying our nation and our faith. Today, Dr. Hendricks will be in conversation with Reverend Dr. Allan Boesak and Reverend Judge Wendell L. Griffen. I have the distinct honor of introducing Reverend Griffen. I have known him for a long time, all of my life, but he's a very young man. Wendell Griffen is an Arkansas Circuit Judge and pastor of New Millennium Church in Little Rock, Arkansas. On the streets in the world, he is known as a pastor, judge, activist, and agitator. He's also the husband to the great Dr. Patricia Griffen and the father to two awesome sons. Without further ado, I will welcome Reverend Judge Wendell Griffen.
Thank you, Anna Rose Hearn. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today for this book talk. We are excited about this opportunity, and I want to thank Pyramid Art Books and Custom Framing for hosting this book talk. I want to thank New Millennium Church for sponsoring this. You can learn about New Millennium Church at www.newmillennium.church.us. And we believe that when you say Jesus, you ought to be able to say justice. And so we are glad to be partnering with Pyramid on this book talk. And it is a joy to welcome two of the greatest minds you're going to have a chance to talk to in this hour in theology. Dr. Obery Hendricks Jr. is the author of Christians Against Christianity: How Right-Wing Evangelicals Are Destroying Our Nation and Our Faith. He is an activist. He is a New Testament scholar. He is a former seminary professor. He's an ordained elder in the African Methodist Episcopal Church. His previous books include the one that really caught me, The Politics of Jesus, Rediscovering the True Revolutionary Nature of Jesus' Teaching and How They've Been Corrupted, and The Universe Bends Towards Justice, Radical Reflections on the Bible, the Church, and the Body Politic. He currently teaches religion and African American studies at Columbia University and is also a visiting professor of Bible and Ethics at Union Theological Seminary in New York City. We're going to be in conversation with Dr. Hendricks, and we're glad to have with us also Dr. Allan Boesak from South Africa, joining us in the 8 o'clock hour in South Africa. Dr. Boesak is a South African liberation theologian who is celebrating his 50th year in ministry this year. He's a global rights activist, and he's professor of Black liberation theology at the University of Pretoria. He has written a number of books. His latest one is titled Selfless Revolutionaries and Children of the Waters of Meribah. Now, let me start right into it. Dr. Hendricks, so glad to have you with us, brother. Good to see you. I know you've been busy, and I just got to tell you right now, I need to just let you go on and talk about this book. I want to tell you that Eddie Glaude did not pull any punches when he said in his book blurb that you had delivered a masterpiece. I mean, you just dropped the doggone bomb. And I would like for you to tell us, number one, what inspired you to write this book? And what is its core message, brother? Thank you.
No, thank you, Judge Griffen, for the invitation. And thank you, Reverend Dr. Boesak, for agreeing to be in conversation. Let me say at the outset, my first career was on Wall Street, but after that I went to seminary, and Dr. Boesak was one of our seminary heroes, and we read your books. They were very enlightening and inspiring, and your witness, on the front lines of the anti-apartheid movement. So I'm very honored that you would take time to talk to me, particularly since it's not the most convenient hour for you there in South Africa. The reason that I wrote this book, folks, is that I just saw all the lies and horror being perpetrated in the name of Christ by the right-wing evangelicals, led by the one they call their Messiah. Literally, some have called him Messiah, Donald Trump, and the harm and the destruction that it is wreaking on our country. I'm just horrified and angered and outraged and saddened by it. And many were pushing against it, not enough people, but I realized there weren't a lot of biblical scholars pushing against it and debunking their claims and showing just how specious and how wrong-headed their use of the Bible is, how they weaponize it against the truth that Jesus would have us live out, that I just felt I had to do something. So I just, took pen to paper, and I didn't know the book would come out as it has, but, it's an expression of, I guess, of the kind of freedom fighting spirit that hopefully that Dr. Boesak and others exemplified in their fight against a more pernicious form of evil. But that pernicious form of evil started somewhere. And where we are, I fear that if we don't do something to stop these people with their lives, because they're winning so far, this right wing, they're winning, they're dominating the discourse. If we don't do something now, we might really have a much, much worse fight, like they've seen other parts in the world. So that's what I wrote, just to be a resource in this fight and do what I could to strike a blow against this terrible reign of evil that we're facing. And it is evil, there's no question about it, because it hurts innocent people just to serve the interests of an uncaring and a sociopathic, malicious few.
I have gone through the book. I have the Kindle version, and I also have the hardback version. I like to line through, write notes and margins, stuff like this. And so I have gone through this book, Dr. Boesak, and your epilogue, man, is a masterpiece in itself. And I want to quote from your epilogue and just ask you to expound on it just for a second. From your epilogue, you write, "It is because of this spirit of Antichrist that dominating American society is now more important to right-wing evangelicals than maintaining the integrity of the Christian gospel, more important than honesty or love or care for those who look to them for truthful guidance and nurturance. In God's name, they have visited upon our nation a plague of lies, a harvest of hate, the rotted fruit of unchecked corruption and moral chaos, and unleashed levels of racial antipathy and xenophobia that untold numbers of lovers of God and humanity had labored and died to keep from ever again seeing the light of day. Not only is their worldview not loving, not generous, not socially inclusive, but the notion of religious freedom they so extol extends no farther than their own ranks. They have so ravaged the social justice legacy of their evangelical forebears that it is now unrecognizable." Doc, that's a powerful indictment.
Yeah.
But I mean, how did we get there? I mean, how did this come to be so?
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, I think there are two milestones in America in which we saw this right-wing evangelical movement began to get its demonic wings. And I think the first actually goes back to the time of Franklin Roosevelt and the New Deal, in which the those who ran the country, the rich capitalists like the DuPont brothers, for instance, and the Pew family and those folk, when FDR established the New Deal, he changed the philosophy of government from saying that we have no responsibility to take care of the people and their needs. Our only responsibility is to respond to the directions of the rich folk. When he changed the direction to look to start looking at the needs of the least of these, those rich folk who thought it was their right to run the country, they had a fit. So they formed the American Liberty League and other stuff to try to fight against the New Deal. But then they also decided to weaponize Christianity against the New Deal. And they enlisted some right-wing evangelical preachers, one particular, this gentleman Feifeld from Reverend Feifeld from Los Angeles, and they started this, calling anything that was to help common people social. They started demonized as socialism, like socialism is a bad thing. Ask Martin Luther King. He was a socialist, so he wouldn't agree with that. Right? So we saw it grow from then, but it really got its legs and its wings in the 70s and 80s. This right-wing evangelical movement, when they had a fit, when Jimmy Carter's government said that educational institutions that practice racial discrimination as a policy, that they would no longer be eligible for public funds. These folks came together, Jerry Falwell and all them, Pat Robertson, and they had a fit, and they were fighting with the test case of Bob Jones University to support racial segregation. And this is how this is the beginning of this recent movement. In other words, their roots are in racial hatred and discrimination, in racism. And then they, just to take it just a little further, and about 1980 or so, Randall Balmer from Dartmouth wrote the book, Thy Kingdom Come, about him being in the room with the top right-wing evangelicals. They were sitting around and saying, well, the Soviet Union is no longer exists, so we can't scare people with communism and all that. So how can we work people up to get them to support us? We have to come up with some wedge issues. And they decided that their wedge issues that they would use to try to outrage people, to help them take over the right-wing evangelicals, to take over American society, they would use homosexuality and they would use abortion. And this is what they have done, to the point that this has become a litmus test, whether you're for abortion or not. When voluntary abortion is not even mentioned in the Bible at all. So that essentially shows how wrong-headed and how cynical the roots are, and the philosophy is of right-wing evangelicalism today. They have always been about dominating society under their white Christian nationalist, I would say, perversion of Christianity, something that I know Dr. Boesak saw firsthand, Lord have mercy, in the fight there in South Africa.
Dr. Boesak, you've read Christians Against Christianity, and what was your reaction to it, sir? You need to unmute.
You're still muted. You're still muted, Dr. Boesak.
There we go. That's right. Oh, so good evening. Oh, good morning, everybody. It's just afternoon there. It's wonderful to be in this conversation. Thank you, Josh Griffen and Dr. Hendricks. What a joy and honor to be with you. You and I have talked about your first book, The Politics of Jesus, and you know how I love that book and how it helped me. And how, I mean, I think of maybe 3 of my recent publications. You are in every single one of them.
Yeah, I've seen that. Thank you.
Because I appreciate so much the insights that I've learned from you. This book is no different, and it will have an even greater impact because your timing is so brilliant with this book. I mean. Everybody knows that Trump is gone, but the evil influence of Donald Trump permeates American politics, permeates American Christianity. And if you look around the world and you see all these dictators and tyrants that take him as their model, from Johnson in the UK to Bolsonaro in Brazil to Narendra Modi in India to Urban in Hungary, it is a frightening thing to see how they all follow this particular Christian nationalist ideology that Donald Trump and Modi's thing is he's just simply taken a Hindu nationalist view, and it is as deadly and as murderous and as devastating as it is. So thank you for doing this. I just want to mention a few things about where this book can take us. I think, Dr. Hendricks, of the immense impact that white fundamentalist evangelical Christianity has on the Christian church in Latin America and in Asia and in Africa. Those fundamentalist churches, because they have all the money in the world, come and they plant churches here, they make people dependent upon their largesse. They bring their theology, and it's all the things that you mentioned. It's a theology of hatred, of exclusionism. It's a theology of violence over against women and LGBTQI people. It's a theology that loves war. Its exclusivism is so frightening. And the thing that we are talking about here in South Africa that I hear from these pastors in these churches is especially their dominion theology, where they believe that only those Christians washed in the blood according to them, who respond to their criteria of being a Christian, only those people should be in government. Yeah. So in a country like South Africa, it means everyone who's a Muslim, everyone who is Jewish, everyone who is not a Christian, but even in the Christian community, I would not be allowed to be in their government because of my views. And and that is driving in a very real sense, that is driving the conversation also here in South Africa. That's the first thing. The second thing I noticed in that book is, you are absolutely right, how much it reminded me of what we had gone through. Now, it's a Christian fascism, and people should not be afraid to say it. I've watched the debate in the United States, how people, journalists, but also academics, dance around those things, because the one thing that they don't want to admit is that America has embraced fascism.
Yes.
And always fascism begins within the bosom of a religion. That's their warm and snug blanket. And you have exposed that. And I recognize that because we've gone through that. And that epilogue that Judge Wendell Griffen has talked about, it is powerful, man. It is as powerful as the very first sentence. I mean, I love that very first sentence in your book. I have the Kindle version, so I had to write it down. You talk about It is a travesty, a brutal sham, a tragic charade. And it's all about deceit. It is all of that. It is a murderous ideology that they now, and I wrote this somewhere, they take the revolutionary from Galilee and they make him the butcher of Nazareth.
Yeah.
If you see how they use the Bible as a weapon of mass destruction, that's now a worldwide phenomenon. And you point out all these things. We dealt with that, and we came to one conclusion: if it is such a travesty, if it is so much against the gospel, if it is the spirit of the Antichrist, then the church must declare it a heresy and a blasphemy.
Yeah.
And that is what we have done. And I'm wondering whether in the debates in the United States, this debate that you have now helped forward so very much, there is this possibility, and maybe there is not a denomination that can begin that conversation, because your circumstances may be different, but maybe there are Christian groups, all of these evangelicals who are progressive, who don't want to give up on the gospel, who don't want to give up on Jesus, but who are outraged that the gospel is so abused and that Jesus is coming out so twisted, that they must begin the debate on whether this kind of theology is a blasphemous travesty, it is a heresy, and declare it as such. And using the language of the Christian church from the very first centuries to make sure that we understand the difference between preaching the gospel and using the gospel for these murderous ideological ends. And it seems to me that those are some of the things that I'm hoping that your book will help us rediscover and to talk again about. I was thinking, in terms of their dominion theology, you remember what happened in Costa Rica, how Munoz, that evangelical Christian, became the president. And it's only as his extremism that woke the people of Costa Rica up, so that in their last election, they threw him out. But he was on the way of taking them over the cliff with this kind of thing. And that's how dangerous they are, because they can convince people to put them in these positions of power, and then they do the agenda that their imperial masters, because it is at heart an imperialist theology that white evangelical Christianity from America is taking across the world. And so they do the bidding of their imperial masters, but it's our people, our faith in God, our trust in the message of the church and in the message of the Bible that they are exploiting in this scandalous way. So thank you so much for this book, my brother.
No, and thank you. You raised some extraordinary, important points there. But what you really raised is a frightening point for those of us in America, and that is that most folk don't seem to realize just how dangerous this movement is.
Exactly.
And we're seeing very little, in relative terms, very little opposition. And in relative terms, our voices, though the numbers of those who do not subscribe to this murderous theology are far exceed the numbers of those who do, they still have the loudest voice. They are winning. They are controlling the direction of government with 15% of the population. Churches are not standing up. Black denominations are not standing up like they should. I had the opportunity to speak to the bench of the bishops of the AME Church, which is my denomination, recently, and I was invited to speak about this very issue, which I thought was very heartening. And maybe we're starting to see movement there. But I'm looking around, the largest Black group in America is the Black Baptists, National Baptists. They're not doing a darn thing.
No,
It's unbelievable. So, that's what's so frightening, that we are being pushed toward a cliff every day, policy-wise. We're being pushed that way. And there's almost no, there's so few voices out there. And I know we're not getting the kind of play like the right wing gets on Fox. But if we were saying more, if we were showing up, if we would go to the, to the State House, to the White House, if we had a presence, if we were writing op-eds, if we were supporting books, if we were doing something, they would make a difference. But right now, we're losing, and if we're not careful, we might really be losing the next few years, because this demon, this sick sociopath who really has done more to deform and misportray the Christian witness in this country more so than anybody else in the history of this country, perhaps Donald Trump. He might be president again.
Yeah, I see that coming.
I think that's important for us to keep in mind. Two things. Number one, the point that you made about fascism is a point that needs to be emphasized, because people do not understand that the political, religious nationalism, heresy, blasphemy are the theological terms, but fascism is the political philosophy, political ideology. Exactly. By which this is weaponized. And I tried to bring this point up to a Baptist leader several years ago who teaches political science in a Baptist school in Arkansas. I will not call the brother's name, but he a white brother, and he is in the Cooperative Baptist. And I said, this is fascism. And he wanted to tell me, well, fascism requires a formal political party. I thought, no, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
And
the fascism begins as a spirit, man, before it ever becomes,
Exactly. And in the Christians Against Christianity, actually on page 100, you recall I quote Toni Morrison.
Yes.
When she talks about the road to fascism, and she gives like eight steps, and we are fulfilling all of those, all of the steps. It's scary.
Yeah, it is. But
Dr.
Hendricks,
Toni Morrison, the 8 steps you outlined on page 100, Toni Morrison said it out clearly. However, to your point, if you talk about that to Black preachers, if you talk about that to moderate white preachers, nobody gets, op-ed writers don't get it. And I want to say this, we are seeing this weaponized Christianity work its way in through to the Black and the Latinx communities through the Pentecostal movement and through Black Baptist movements. I'll just put it out there, you can't go into a church without somebody quoting Tony Evans or T.D. Jakes or Juanita Bynum.
That's right. That's right.
And they're backward. They're backward. Tony Evans, God bless him. I think he means well, but man, he's getting more backward by the day politically. But I must say, we don't have the kind. I want to acknowledge a giant in that regard in the fight against religious fascism, who's been calling the clarion call for years. Reverend Dr. Jeremiah Wright, who's on the line here.
Amen.
Has been just a giant and an extraordinary friend and mentor to me. And to so many of us, people like him have been on the front line for years, calling that out, and it's just like, shouting in the wilderness. So he's, he has myself, Freddie Haynes, some other people that he's mentor, who's trying to pick, and there people around the country, but we just can't seem to get folk moving, and we're going to have. It seems like we're going to have an extraordinary tragedy has to happen to wake folk up.
To that point, Dr. Hendricks, I contend that had it not been for Bloody Sunday, and the fact that Bloody Sunday was televised, that people saw John Lewis and people getting beaten by state troopers as they crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and dogs and horses running over, that we wouldn't happen. However, we have seen that. We saw earlier this year Border Patrol people on horses beating Haitian immigrants.
Yeah, but
That's
brother,
right.
they were the other. You see, I mean, it's like they weren't, people just, and black folk too, let's face it, we often look at folk from different cultures as as being the other. We didn't have the kind of hue and cry. Now, if it had been some folk getting beaten like that in a black community, there might have been a different response. But folk didn't get upset, did they, about these people being whipped like back in slavery time from guys on horseback? No, there was very little hue and cry.
Well,
Yeah, but that raises a question though. I mean, don't people make the connections between what is happening on the border and to Haitian folk and to others, and the Black Lives Matter movement, what is happening to Black people at the hands of the police, which is always the first expression of governmental authority for our people on the streets. So, I mean, I sit here and I see how the Black Lives Matter movement has become a global movement. When I watch television and there's a young 14-year-old white Dutch girl who talks Black Lives Matter in Amsterdam, then I think this movement has the potential to blow up this evil stuff. Now, how is it possible that so many of our people in the United States themselves don't make the connection between what is happening to us there and what is happening to us when we come into the United States as a Haitian stranger, as the alien, as the immigrant that you so powerfully spell out in your book? And how come that we do not understand that the justice that the Bible talks about of God and Jesus, that is indivisible, it's radical, it's indivisible. The solidarity of God is radical and indivisible, and is radical inclusivity.
Yeah.
And so when you say, I always say to people, it's taken me a while to formulate this and to discover what it means. If you say Jesus, you have to say justice. And if you say justice, you have to say Jesus. And the more you say justice, the more you have to say Jesus. Otherwise, you won't make it in this struggle. Now, if we could make those connections that are so vital, and that's something that Jeremiah Wright has known for all these years and taught all of us, how come we cannot make these connections at a time that is so vital? Because, colleagues, I think that not only are we looking at the 8 steps, I am at a point where I think if the church and if our people as people of faith don't understand that the world has come, history has come to a tipping point once again. And if we are not there at the forefront of the struggle, realizing that the Kairos moment has come, this moment will pass us by. We will wake up tomorrow, but it'll be a day too late.
Absolutely.
And that's one of my great fears here.
Yes, and see, when you look at why are we not seeing more movement? Why aren't we seeing more of an identification with the terrible struggles of these Black and brown immigrants? Well, question is, I would ask, well, what is the most powerful institution in the Black community?
Yeah.
Of course, it is the church.
That's the church.
And so what's happening? The church, it's things aren't happening because the church is not happening. Churches aren't doing this, aren't really getting the fight. And a lot of it is because there's a knowledge gap. A lot of these pastors don't read.
Yes, right.
They don't pay attention. They don't make the kinds of connections. And and a lot of it is not because they're negligent. They don't have the opportunity, or they went to seminary and these kinds of things weren't raised. But when you have someone like Jeremiah Wright, who's been calling this out in such erudite and clear ways and writing about it for years, what happens when they finally get a national platform? They are attacked, and the church did not support.
Right.
Did not support him and did not amplify his message. So this is really one of the biggest parts of our struggle, is to try to mobilize these folk to wake them up, to get them to read and to pay attention. And so when we start lifting up, supporting folk, though, what do? They come after them. We have to surround them and control them, because as long as a Tucker Carlson has the license to say whatever the heck he wants, you know, if a Wendell Griffen gets up and cuts too close to the bone and gets too large a hearing, it's going to shut them down, because we don't have, we're not mobilized, not just on the ground, but we have access to social media. We're not even mobilized that way to push back. Oh my God, y'all got me.
And if I may go on, Dr. Boesak, Dr. Hendricks, what we do read is not helpful. I see too many Black preachers reading John MacArthur.
Yeah.
I see too many Black preachers quoting Billy Graham. They don't quote Jeremiah Wright.
Yeah, that's right.
They quote Billy Graham. Okay.
Yeah, but what are we teaching seminarians when they come to seminary? What are we telling those? What are we giving them to read?
Yeah.
I mean,
you know what they're giving them? They're giving them the same dominationist line, which is in the trajectory from Constantine's changing the faith of the oppressed to the religion of the oppressor. But what we're not getting is what they're not getting, and what we lack is real skills of critical social analysis, right? I mean,
that's right.
Very few. I mean, for instance, capitalism. Martin Luther King was so clear on this. Capitalism just distorts and oppresses our lives and our relationships. It distorts even the way we understand and understand time. You know, in capitalism, we have that we are slaves in the marketplace. We don't have democracy in the marketplace and all that. But even though this is what affects the lives of the sheep, of the flocks of these pastors, so few of them understand what capitalism is and how it works. Yeah. That's why Martin Luther King understood that socialism, that society focusing on lifting up the common good rather than individual largesse. He understood that's much closer to the biblical witness, right? Than capitalism. But preachers will attack you if you say that you talk about socialism. Why? Because they won't teach capitalism and socialism in seminary. They don't teach political economy, though that's what controls our lives. So we're up against that as well. And in previous books, I've written in my book, The Universe Bends Toward Justice. That's why I spent 2 long chapters dealing with political economy. So right. Dr. Boesak, that's what we're up against, this legacy of dominationist teaching that obfuscates the real issues that we have to face to free ourselves and to build, right, as King said, another architecture, a new architecture of society.
Could it be also that one reason why the dominationist theology has been so pernicious and pervasive is because it blends not only racism, but also sexism and patriarchy?
Yes, that's right.
As there has been a rising and well vocalized message of equality for women and gender equity, there has been a pushback from white males who have also weaponized the religion of Jesus and have been able to get a hearing among, I'll go there, some Black male preachers who view the rise and the call of justice for women as a threat to their sense of authority.
Clearly. I mean, fundamentalist religion from white Christian America comes always with a package deal. And patriarchalism, and capitalism, and imperialism, and dominationism, and anti-homophobia, and all of those, that comes as a package deal. You have to take it all. And they preach it all. And of course, once you marry that to the prosperity gospel, where you can become rich in the process, that's a powerful, powerful temptation that very few preachers can withstand. That's the one thing that I wanted to say. The other thing that I thought we should think about is, I am so grateful that you begin that book with such a righteous anger, with such outrage, and that you end it with the same outrage. I mean, I always think Jesus's love for justice always matches Jesus's outrage at injustice. And you bring that together so beautifully in that book. But I have been thinking, you must tell me whether I'm right. I think one of the reasons why fascism and white supremacy and white Christian nationalism and patriarchalism are coming back with such a vengeance and is pushing through every single level of society in every way in which they can manifest itself, is because they have this anger, because we have been so successful in creating an alternative for society through the civil rights movement, through the anti-apartheid movement, and now with Black Lives Matter. I mean, they come back with Black Lives Matter and everything else, and they kill more Black people in this year than they did last year.
Yeah.
So there is an aspect of vengeance and anger from their side, because they are afraid is one thing, but because they understand what we don't understand. They also know this is a tipping point in history. If they don't win the battle now, they will lose the battle forever. And how come the disciples of the devil understand that, but we can't, as followers of Jesus? That drives me crazy.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think a lot of it is, you think about it, in our discourse, we don't use the term evil.
Yeah.
No.
And so it's maybe bad politics or something like that. But if we would really look in the eye and say, this is by any measure evil, this is an evil movement. It might wake folk up, but it's so hard. Capitalist hegemony has done such a good job of cooling folk out. And the models of ministry, at least in the Black church these days, are so so materialistic.
That's right.
And so bogus and so much about performance that it's almost like there's no room for them to proclaim this. I'm just wondering, I've never been a pastor, but if a pastor has grown his church,
or her church,
but it's mostly men that do this. Well, women do too now, though, that build a church based on a performance orientation. And without much of a prophetic voice. And that is what the people came for, and that's what they expect. I guess it must be hard to shift gears, or to even have the perspective to shift gears to do something more prophetic. I guess what I'm saying is, I'm really frightened because I see the Black church too slowly coming to grips with what we are faced with.
May I suggest something? And you correct me, Dr. Hendricks, Dr. Boesak. The Black church had a choice in the 60s within the model of Martin Luther King Jr. and Samuel DeWitt Proctor, and then 70s Jeremiah Wright, and before that Adam Payton Powell Jr. They had the model, or we had the model, and I'm going to get my Baptist friends are going to fuss at me, of Joseph H. Jackson, okay, or the pacifier preachers, okay, and for religious pietism was viewed as preferable to prophetic activism. And so the prophetic activism of Jesus, of the Hebrew prophets, of Jeremiah Wright, of Martin Luther King Jr., of Samuel Wood Proctor was disregarded in favor of the pietism that was lionized by Billy Graham. Let's just say it. And then was lionized by Black clergy, Joseph H. Jackson in the National Baptist Convention. That was the biggest Baptist. And we had that. And until we can admit that that spirit has pacified the prophetic notion of the church, we're going to have a challenge, because that spirit runs rampant. Does it not?
Well, I mean, no, that's for sure.
Oh,
And
it's
not only that. It is also that we, in the Black church now, we have also been infected by the cowardice of liberal theology. So you don't
And
take a chance. That's what I mean. That's what I mean. You don't take a stance. You seek to be neutral. You seek to be always gentle. If you marry that to the pietism, then you get what you've got. But I mean, what the Black church does have still is we do have the prophetic tradition. We can point to people. We have heard their voices. There is, again, we have to point to Jeremiah Wright sitting in this company with us. And it's not as if his voice is completely silent. I mean, when I want to be inspired and it's in the middle of the night for me, Jerry, I go to YouTube, man, and I look you up. And you have no idea what that does to me. Because I say to myself, we have that tradition. And the other thing that we had in the 1970s is we had an international prophetic network. We knew about each other. We understood each other. We encouraged each other. And I think the Samuel Wood Proctor Conference, for instance, is a perfect vehicle to do that in the United States, but internationally. And that's how we bring the prophetic voices together again. As long as we have the living models amongst us, we got to do it, and we got to do it soon. I keep on saying that. We can't wait until tomorrow.
We cannot. Yes, we have to acknowledge that Jeremiah Wright was the instigator and one of the co-founders of the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference, which is, I think the foremost progressive Christian and radical Christian organization in America, and it's mentoring and teaching so many folk. In fact, I'm going to be lecturing to them to seminary students when we finish this today. But that's of these issues really why I wrote this book, because they are so many of our folk are under the sway of white Christian nationalism and don't even realize it. And I'm not saying that all Christianity of all people of European extraction is white Christian, no. But the right wingers, they're right Christian nationalists, and they have a substratum of white supremacy beneath them. But that's why it was so important to address John MacArthur when he said that social justice is anti-biblical, and to explain how backward and wrong it is. It's so important to deal with the way that they try to say that unequivocally the Bible derides and denounces and casts into outer darkness same gender loving folk. When you look at the handful of passages that seem to say that for all time, all same gender loving people are sinners and are outside the will of God, to realize that when we look at those sayings clearly, we look at them in cultural context, we look at how limited they are, we look at, we translate them correctly. That includes Paul's 2 places. That is not at all clear that that's what's being said. So we don't have the right to attack people and to delimit their life chances. The same with abortion. I'm not saying whether abortion is right or wrong. There's abortion is a very, very tough thing. But to denounce people and even to kill people because they say a woman has a right to choose, when the Bible doesn't say anything about voluntary abortion at all, that has to be brought to light. Same with immigration. The Bible talks about the ger, normally translated stranger, but it means immigrants, those from without. These people are to be accepted, the Bible tells us, as we accept ourselves, and to be supported until they can support themselves. And that tithing, one of the reasons for tithing was to be able to support immigrants on down the line, and to show how these people have church services to bless AR-15 weapons of death and destruction, to consecrate them in the name of God, talking about God-given right to own guns and all that. I mean, that had to be debunked and show that it has no room in the Bible, even to show how they are so anti-working person, anti-labor, how they work to the detriment of the welfare of working people. These things have to be shown, and how they do it in the name of God, and show that that not only does not the Bible does not support it, but the Bible militates against it. So that's what I tried to do. But that's what we all have to get. That's the kind of knowledge and information we all have to get out there, so these folks can know just how wrong and how evil in many instances this right wing is. And that's the point. They don't seem to really realize that they are absolutely wrong, and that they are militating, they're anti-Christian, that they militate against the gospel.
That's right.
Okay, now it's been good among the three of us, but I gotta kick it to Anna or to Victoria Mays, because we promised people could ask questions on the chat. Okay. And I need to give that opportunity, give faith to the opportunity. I want to two things before I do that. We need to call the name of James H. Cone in this context.
Yes.
We need to call the name of James H. Cone in this context, because James H. Cone saw this and preached about this, and in his cross from the lynching tree, I mean, he let it out, and so we are all, in a real sense, echoing what James H. Cone did. And I say that not only because we are influenced by James H. Cone, but because James H. Cone was from Arkansas. God bless his soul.
Right. All right.
Sister Anna or Victoria, do we have questions on the chat? I see a.
Okay, so right now we don't have any questions in the chat, but if anyone has questions that you just feel comfortable putting in a chat, you can do that, and I'll be looking at that. Or just feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question aloud to us. And I see Althea, you have a question for us? Okay, go for it.
Unmute yourself, sister.
Thank you so much. Dr. Hendricks, I cannot express enough how powerful and how important this discussion is. I had other things on my plate this morning, but I said I have got to tune in. I ordered your book yesterday. I cannot wait to read it, but I'm aware very much about what has been happening with this evil assault on all of the basic principles of Christianity. And my great fear is that people are not waking up. As all of you have been pointing out, they're not aware of what time it is. The closest thing that I can go back to, and I wasn't old enough to remember, but reading about what happened when Hitler came to power in Germany, and what happened to the Jewish people, and it took another generation for them to overcome all of that. But the same kinds of tactics are being used now to get people who are vulnerable and who are afraid of losing their power, however you wish to think of that. That's what is causing a lot of look at the January 6th insurrection, the attack on the Capitol, all of that. And I kept going back to what happened in Germany, because I've had the the privilege of talking to a few Holocaust survivors, and that really has struck me to the core about what they went through. No one could make that up. Slavery. I'm reading the 1619 Project now, and of course, a lot of the things that Nicole Hannah-Jones brought out in those essays, in that collection, if people could just realize that we are still dealing with the after effects of all of that. So thank you for bringing this up. I'm just concerned about the fact that people are not aware of what time it is. You know, we need to wake up. And that's my great fear, that it may be too late. Hopefully not. I mean, I don't want to sound negative about all of this, but I'm just really concerned about the fact that so many people are asleep. You know, they go to church and they hear the piety and the, you know, have a good time and we're going to sing, and nothing wrong with singing and all of that. But at the same time, there's a prophetic message out there that is being ignored.
Amen.
So thank you for saying, for your presentation.
No, thank you, Sister Wade.
Dr. Hendricks, you want to respond?
No, I just like to, I mean, I agree with him. I thank her for her words, but you know, sister, I'm very worried. I mean, there's no guarantee that we will not go the way of fascism. I mean, right now the momentum is that we are going that way. I remember years ago, I grew up in the Black nationalist movement with Amiri Baraka in Newark, New Jersey, and I remember him saying, you know, saying there's no guarantee that the N-word will survive, you know, and there's no guarantee that America. I mean, we believe in this America, in the American dream, and this will never happen to us. Well, why not? You know, I mean, why won't it happen to us? I mean, we never dreamed that we'd have a backward line piece of trash like Donald Trump in the White House, doing all, I mean, ignoring every law, every rule of civility. We never dreamed we'd have that. We never dreamed in our lifetime that the Pandora's box of racism and hatred would be reopened the way it is today. And we never dreamed that we would see the capital of the United States attacked like so many countries that we've looked down on in the past. So there's no reason to believe that this cannot happen to us. And the only way that it cannot happen is if we fight it and don't let it happen. So I'm with you. I'm very, I'm not optimistic at all. Hopeful, but not at all optimistic.
Well, that means that's the prophetic end. The prophetic end does not dwell on rosy colored glasses. It sees the evil, calls the evil what it is, and then sees beyond the evil to God's remnant, but recognizes that there is an accountability for people who will embrace evil and will not repent from it.
Yeah.
Yes, you know, Cornel West used to always, he used to talk about Anton Chekhov, that Russian short story writer, and quoted from one of the plays, and one of you might know, but she says at the end, I can't go on, I will go on. And that's where we are. This is just too much to bear. We can't handle it, but we'll handle it, but we'll go on. That's a sad
question. Yeah. Oh, there's another question. Okay.
Another question coming. Sister Victoria? There's another question.
Give me 1 second. I'm pulling it up. Okay. It says, Dr. Hendricks, given all that you have said and have written about, I am purchasing the book. Where and how do we begin? Everyone is not connected as many of those on the Zoom. How does one begin to help those outside of the conversation? It is almost overwhelming to listen and want to act, but how?
Wow, I can share my thoughts, and others might have, you know, stronger thoughts than mine. You know, have more experience in this, like Dr. Boesak, for instance. But I mean, we just have to. First of all, I think it's a freedom-fighting, justice-seeking perspective that we have to develop, in that this is the most important thing for us. So first, we start on a personal level, I think, and that is, you know, we engage people around us, particularly when we hear them or see them engaged in in things that aren't positive, that and that really might even militate against their own interests without them realizing it. And then we have to use whatever gifts and skills we have. If you're a writer, write. If you're a preacher, preach. If you're in community groups, we have to form community groups. In our churches, we have to form groups, political action committees and all that. It's really about raising consciousness wherever we can and however we can, I think, and organizing, organizing and then coalescing with other groups to try to fight this evil. And so I'm saying that I think it's important for that to become part of and entrenched in our consciousness. And so whatever we do is in service to this freedom fight that we have to fight. Dr. Boesak, can you share some thoughts from your experience? And you're muted. Mm-hmm.
I think you're absolutely right. Two things here. When we started talking about apartheid is a heresy, and how to express that politically and theologically.
That was so important.
But that conversation started in 1977 in a small group that we called the Confessing Circle of some Black preachers. 5 years later, the World Alliance of Reformed Churches, representing over 75 million Christians across the world, took that over as an official resolution and suspended the White Dutch Reformed Churches for their fascist and the theology and what they have done with the gospel, in the same way that you're talking about white evangelical Christianity in the United States. So we must not forget that many of these things start with a small circle. Now, in the United States, you are extraordinarily fortunate because the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference is a wonderful space where these things are happening. So that's not a small circle like we were in 1977. You already have a platform. You already have a great people. And so please make use of that. That's number one.
Before you go any further, let me do a commercial. The Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference is beginning now. Dr. Hendricks is dean this year, and it will be beginning now, and it's not too late to register. It'll be through next week, and so now you can get it into this. It's virtual, and you can, just like you can virtually interface with this conversation, you interface with Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference. Continue, Dr. Boesak. I see you, Kathy, Penny, and I'm coming to you.
Well, I just wanted to say, one of the things that we are learning, Dr. Hendricks, now, after almost 30 years of democracy after 1994, is we have allowed other people, even those people who look like us but serve other interests, to define for us what freedom is, and to define for us what democracy is. And now there is a battle in this country, literally going on. Is this liberation we are talking about? Is that liberation? Is this democracy? Democracy. And I remember a study from Northwestern University and Princeton University scholars about American democracy, where they show it's not a democracy. It is an incidental democracy.
Yeah.
It is a plutocracy where the desires and the wishes of the rich are driving policy in the United States, and is only democratic when what the rich want sometimes accidentally coincides with what the people want. But that's becoming less and less and less and less. So this thing, we are a great democracy. We are wonderful. I had to come to the realization, this rainbow nation thing, even though it was thought up by my close friend, Desmond Tutu, that's not true. That's a delusion. Don't get hung up on the politics of delusion. Don't talk about our freedom and this if it's not real. We have political freedom to a certain extent, but we have no economic freedom. This country is run by the wealth of 6 white men, and the president of this country has been made a billionaire by those 6 white men, and they are running the country through him. That's the reality. I'm done with thinking, oh my goodness, Mandela. That's over. Mandela is not here. If he had if he had been alive and saw what was being happening today, he would die all over again. And so we've got to disabuse ourselves of illusionary notions that paralyze us and that cannot allow us to do the kind of political and social analysis that you say that we must have, not just as preachers, but as everybody else, as a citizen.
All right. Kathy Manis Finley has had her hand raised. Kathy Finley in Macon, GA, formerly from New Millennium Church. Kathy, you had a comment or question.
Yes, I did. First of all, it is an honor to be with prophets today. And my life was changed when I read your book, Dr. Boesak, Radical Reconciliation at New Millennium. And what I was wondering is, you know, the evil ones, whoever they are out there, and Donald Trump, have truly turned our singing into mourning, our dancing into mourning. And what I'm wondering is two things. One, if you're looking, we already know that the Trump people out there are crazy and they truly believe him to be whatever, the Messiah or whatever they believe. We already know that. But one question I have is, does the Republican leadership in our country, as we once knew it, do they really believe in Trump as they're behaving like they do?
No, this is about power, Kathy.
Yeah.
This is the theme that Dr. Boesak and Dr. Hendricks addressing, and Dr. Hendricks is dominationism. It is domination. And ultimately, this is about power politics. And what happened is, beginning in 1968, the Republican Party saw that with the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, they could no longer count on having a win-win unless they could get the George Wallace voters. And so Richard Nixon went after George Wallace voters. Ronald Reagan then, with Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson's help, took it another step further. And now we have this power, the Supreme Court grab, the legislature grab, the voter suppression. This is all about raw power. Like it says in Micah, they do it because it is in their power. And this is all about power. They don't care about Donald Trump. They know Donald Trump is a sociopath. However, if he's a sociopath that gives them Supreme Court justices and free market economics and free market capitalism and oppression of women and LGBTQI people and immigrants and elevation of white males, then they will do it. This is a devil's deed.
Well, what we have, though, I think it's a good point, Sister. Also, the way they approach Christianity, as I talk about in the book, is this is an idea. They are ideological Christians. It's not about being a Christian of faith in the biblical witness. It is, they're ideological in that Christianity for them is whatever serves their interests. So they define Christianity as what serves their interests, their welfare, and they sacralize those things as though they're really part of the biblical witness. And that's what's so frightening, is that this ideological Christianity, by which they weaponize the Bible and certain theological concepts, it is seductive for folk. Folk think that this is really what the Bible is about. And so they can look at someone like Donald Trump, who is the most irreligious, most immoral, most corrupt and unethical person imaginable, and not see that. They see him as someone who will serve their interests, so they can sacralize him and even talk about, like one woman says she looks forward to there being a book of Trump in the Bible.
Yeah.
Nobody who believes in the biblical witness as an object of faith and guidance can possibly believe that, but they don't care. They asked. There was a poll, PRRI, conducted a poll of right-wing evangelicals and asked them if the Bible guided their attitude on immigration. And the Bible talks about immigration, many, many, many times. These folks, 90% of these folks said no. Their attitude they had nothing to do with the Bible. So that's the problem. They've weaponized the Bible really well. And people have a hard time seeing this as an evil ideology. And I don't call them evil people necessarily. Some of them are. But what they all have in common is they subscribe to an ideology of evil. And that's even worse, right? Because some people are purveyors of evil and don't even realize it.
May I exercise the prerogative of a moderator? I know we have 1:16 by my time, and I would be remiss if I did not recognize and give an opportunity to have a word from Reverend Dr. Jeremiah Wright, because he's in the house and his name has been called. I don't want his name to be called in vain. And Baba J, you got to say something.
And then I'll have to leave.
About you. You better talk to us.
And I'll have to leave after that, the conversation to go on to Samuel Proctor Conference that Dr. Jeremiah Wright established. So I love you, Dr. Wright. I love you. What a giant you are for us.
Yeah, man. And Dr. Wright, go ahead. Dr. Hendricks, thank you. Folks, get this book, get it, read it, talk about it. Dr. Wright, Dr. Hendricks, thank you. Thank you, brother. I'll see you at the Proctor Conference on the virtual.
Okay, God bless.
Okay, bless you.
Yes.
Dr. Hendricks,
thank you, Dr.
Boesak is staying. Dr. Wright, you're.
Okay.
What time is it?
I'm saying till 1:30, right? That's okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Jim.
What time is your first class over?
3 o'clock Eastern time.
Okay. I really don't judge. I don't know where to start. I was thinking and wrestling with the term political respectability. Is that what it's called? Political respectability. Is that the correct term?
I don't know if it's correct or not.
I think they talk about, don't they talk about civility? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Political civility.
Political civility, yeah. Or political correctness.
In my first trip to Cuba with Randall Robinson, on the last day of a 2-week trip, the Minister of Education asked, "What are you going to do with all this knowledge? What are you going to do now that you've read Boesak, Hendricks, King? What are you going to do with this knowledge?" This was when Ronald Reagan was president. We said we're going back and work as hard as possible to make sure he does not get reelected. The Minister of Education stroked his chin and said, "Oh, you want to give us a Democrat?" We know the Democrats. They gave us the Bay of Pigs.
Wow.
Republican, Democrat, it's all the same. So I think I'll start there. When you look at the Bible as it was intended to be looked at and read and understood, the prophets were not afraid to call names.
Right.
Of their own people.
Right.
We have to apologize every time. Now it's safe to call J.H. Jackson name, he dead. But let me give you half a backstory before Allan had to leave. I was literally run out of South Carolina by an AME bishop because I dared to quote King on the day after Clemente was murdered.
Wow.
King said, we all know by heart, we're not fighting racism, we're fighting what? Racism, militarism, and capitalism. The bishop said, get him out of town, shut the revival down. And they threatened the pastor, if he says one more word in your pulpit, I'm moving you the next day.
What?
Yep. And my good friend Melinda Contreras Bird just wrote a book on Holy Rage. And I told that story. She begged me to please take that illustration out of my chapter.
Oh, no.
Because it would jeopardize the appointment system in the AME church, which we know as well.
Lord have mercy.
We were worried about appointments, and she said, you don't call his name when people say, well, who was bishop in South Carolina when Reagan was president? Ah, and then he's coming after us. That kind of fear, nobody writes Christians against Christianity. Let's talk about the Black Christians. We're not going to change the white Christians. Jesus said, deliver us from evil. He didn't say destroy evil. Let's talk about those who look like us, as Allan calls them, the new pharaohs that look just like us, and the damage that they are doing. Let's call, as you did today on this conversation, no more sheets, find them. Do you know what Jamal said to me? I went to hear him preach. He read John 1 through 14, ending with, the word became flesh and dwelt among us. I'd like for you to pray with me today on the subject, the gospel according to John Q. Did he exegete the movie?
John Q.
He never even went back to visit the text. Passed by it in the same block. And after service, I said to him, you know, you sound just like T.D. Jakes. He said to me, they got the number, Reverend. How many you got?
Oh, man. Oh, man.
Yeah, that's what we're up against, Lord. That's what we're up against.
But he's an icon. We don't want to say they didn't support you, am I right? John Bryant's daddy, Jamal Bryant's daddy calls us, Proctor Conference, the gay conference. Told the AMEs, they as senior bishop, they could not support the Proctor Conference in any way, form, or fashion.
So this issue of the evangelicals, right-wing evangelicals, look like us, as you mentioned, Dr. Wright.
Yeah.
Dr. Wright, I have to run, but I'm taking that point with me. You gave me a pearl. You give me some pearl. Thank you so much. Please go on, continue to grace these people and bless them. I'm sorry, I have to. They're telling me to come on. God bless you. Thank you, Dr. Boesak. Thank you, Dr. Griffen. And Dr. Wright, you know I love you, and God bless you. I got to give you a call real soon.
Thank
New
you.
Millennium Church thanks you, Dr. Hendricks.
Thank you for using your mind in the fight.
Thank you. I wish I could tell you all Jeremiah Wright has done for me. I don't have the time. It would take too much time, but God bless everybody. I'm sorry, I have to go.
Bless you. All right, we still got 5 more minutes, and I need to bring off. So Dr. Wright, I want to thank you, but I want to give Dr. Boesak a chance to respond to what Dr. Wright said, and then I want to kick it back to Victoria Mays, who's our parting host to conclude. I want to thank those of you who've been viewing this this book talk. I want to thank Dr. Hendricks for writing this book. And I want to thank New Millennium Church. Hey, I gotta give a shout out to New Millennium Church, these people who believe in Jesus and justice, for being people who embraced Jeremiah Wright, who preached at our church, and embraced Dr. Allan Boesak, who's preached at our church. Dr. Boesak, would you please give us a closing word, and then I'll kick it to Victoria May. Victoria, get ready.
Well, thank you, Judge Griffen, and thank you, Dr. Jeremiah Wright. It has been wonderful to be with you tonight. It is always great to have you with us, Jeremiah, and to hear what you have to say. And I mean, you remember all of those things. That's the hard part, right? When you live so long. You have all these memories. Nobody can lie to you because you can remember. They come to you now. Oh, Doc, I love you, but you say, I remember. So it's wonderful to have all of that. And thank you, Jerry. I look forward to seeing you on Wednesday night when we have 70, 60, 76. And you too, Wendell. And I thank everybody for this wonderful conversation this evening.
Bless you, Dr. Allan Boesak. We'll be with you Wednesday night. We were celebrating 50 years of Dr. Boesak's ministry from 1976 to this year. And we thank God for you, Dr. Boesak. I want to kick it to C. Garbo Hearn, who is the director of Pyramid Gallery, who is also a member of New Millennium Church. I want to kick it to her and Victoria Mays. Victoria, you and Garbo take us out. Thank you one and all for being on this book talk. God bless you. We'll do more. We had Obery Hendricks. In October, we had Allan Boesak. In November, we had Miguel de la Torre in October. And Allan Boesak in November, Obery Hendricks this year. We'll do more. God bless you. I want to get Dr. Jeremiah Wright one of these times when you give us a chance. Victoria, take it, please, sister.
Okay, so thank you all. First, want to thank all of our speakers and moderators today. Dr. Obery Hendricks, who did have to leave us for another engagement, but also Reverend Dr. Allan Boesak and Reverend Judge Wendell L. Griffen. Thank you all so much for the wonderful conversation. And then also to just Reverend Jeremiah Wright for joining us today. What a privilege that was, right? So we did want to let you all know that you can purchase the book. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you all can get more specifics on that. Give me one moment so you know where to access it. Okay, so you can pick up your copy from Pyramid Art Books and Custom Framing here in Little Rock at 1001 Wright Avenue. So just know that if you do not feel comfortable going in store, the book is available for curbside pickup as well. If you would like to call and do a pre-order or order the book on the website, you can do that as well. The phone number is 501-372-5824. And then the website is www.pyramid1988.com. And then those for you who are great with emailing, you can also shoot Pyramid an email at pyramidartbooks@gmail.com. Once again, we do have copies of those books for you, for those of you that would like it. And we are so thankful for those of you that joined us as guests to hear this very wonderful conversation. And we hope that you all will join us in the future. So feel free, if you all have any questions, comments, or concerns, to contact Pyramid directly, and we hope to take care of those for you. And we hope you have a great evening.
God bless you. Thank you very much.